Everyone, just give me a second here and I'll try to bring the agenda up on my phone. There we go. All right. It being 7:08, which is actually not too bad considering. I'd like to call the May 11th Planning Advisory Committee meeting to order. Note that all of the committee is present. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest to the general nature thereof? There being none, we have an addition to the agenda, late addition. Angela, without me toggling off screen and back on screen, could you just give me a quick rundown of the proposed addition to the agenda?
So it's a new minor variance application that I received today, but due to timing under the Planning Act and when the Committee of Adjustment would like to hear it, it'd be better if Council heard it tonight. So if we can add it under 11.2 on the agenda, that would be great. Bruce has advised that he is willing to speak to the application because we have no background.
All right. Any objections to the addition to the agenda for this evening? Okay, can I have a mover and seconder, please, for the amended agenda? We'll take Heather and Scott. All in favor? Sorry, I could have done that without my phone. Carried. There's no delegations. Mover and seconder, please, for the adoption of the previous planning minutes. Councillor Broome, Councillor Jacob. April 13th, any comments or concerns? All in favor of receiving this information? Carried. Mover and seconder, please, for reports. Councillor Jacob and Councillor Lang. Questions or concerns for 8.1, Building and Septic Department report? Mayor Peckett?
Just a comment, looking at the 5-year average, I noticed that here we are just in the end of April, early part of May, and we're almost at 50% of the buildings, new homes built in the township last year. And we're just now getting into construction season. So I'm hoping that we will have another good year as far as additions to homes in our township. Thank you.
Well said, sir. Any other comments? Councillor Broome?
Just around those same lines, I look at the dollar amount. We have almost $4 million worth of work being done. So that means, you know, jobs, jobs, jobs.
Sir. Anybody else? All in favor of receiving this information? Carried. Down to 11.1, application for consent. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Broome, Councillor Lang. Cole Smith application. Bruce, anything to add on this one that you haven't already stated in your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'll be brief on this one. I don't have anything in addition, just that we have favorable comments from the County Public Works, and you've, I think, committee's seen this condition enough to know, understand the 1 square foot transfer over to the township road is also required for this as well. So I don't think there's anything there's no red flags. This one, we recommend it being approved subject to those two items. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Any comments or questions from the committee? All in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Just let me toggle back here. I don't even have to leave the screen this time. Mover and seconder for 11.2, the new item. Councillor Broome, Councillor Jacob. Who is going to speak to this on our behalf? Just before we go to you, Bruce, Angela and Lindsay, has the new agenda item been distributed to the members of the committee? Or are we going in blank on this one? Because I've seen it, I just don't know if everybody else has. Everybody else has? Okay, I just wanted to, before we started in, I wanted to make sure that people have a copy of it for consultation, I guess is the best word. So Bruce, fire away.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this is an application for a minor variance, and it's one that we see quite frequently, is to permit a secondary dwelling on a property. So there have been changes to the Planning Act recently, well, actually, no, over the last couple of years, which essentially say that people should be allowed as a right to have a secondary dwelling on their property. And the only sort of context or limitation is servicing. So right now, the official plan has a policy in place saying for properties on a well and a septic, if you are under 1 acre, you are not allowed to have a secondary dwelling. It's just a full stop. 1 acre is the minimum size to qualify for having a secondary dwelling unit. If you have, the policy goes on to say, if you have between 1 acre and 2 acres, you may qualify for a secondary dwelling, but you have to provide a hydrogeological evaluation to look at the well and septic to make sure that the increase of density is not going to have any outside effects, making sure that the water, you have enough water to support 2 dwellings, and your septic system is going to be big enough to support those 2 dwellings. But the policy requires you that the main dwelling and the secondary dwelling have to share those services. So you're still only allowed one well and 1 septic system that both of those dwelling units would have to use. Then the third prong of that policy is that if your property is larger than 2 acres, you apply for the minor variance, you can get it, but there's no need to have that hydrogeological evaluation. It's just sort of almost like hopefully in the future, it will just be allowed as of right, and you won't even need to have a minor variance when the township updates the zoning bylaw, that you'd be allowed to have your secondary dwelling, provided it meets those criteria of sharing the well and septic system. This property that you have in front of you today it's a farm property, and the application just came in today, but we have done some pre-consultation with them, and they decided to submit their application anyways. But so I'll give you some of the context from behind it. So they're looking to build a secondary dwelling for some farm help. The property is designated prime agricultural land, which doesn't limit the secondary dwelling proposal, but they want to put it in a location that is away from their primary dwelling. They're also putting it in an area that's not, again, it's not their best farmland. It is within an area that's sort of difficult to farm. So they're not using up any of the prime agricultural land. The problem is that it does not meet that criteria of sharing the well and septic system that the official plan requires. That being said, right now, as you all know, because I think the draft has been circulated to the township and we've talked about it in the past. So there's proposed amendments coming to the official plan. And one of those amendments that is under consideration and it's drafted is that properties, I can't remember the exact size, I think it's over 20 acres. If you have a property that's over 20 acres, that criteria of not having to share the well and septic would not apply, so that you could have 1 dwelling in 1 area of your property and then a second dwelling on its own private well and septic in a separate area of the property if you meet that minimum size proper size. And this property would meet that criteria. So if that, if we were in the fall and that's the official plan policy was approved, there would be no issue whatsoever. It would be, a recommendation that the application be approved, no conditions, no requirement for any hydrogeological study, no other requirements. The applicant is kind of under some time pressure to get this done, get this dwelling constructed. And so he submitted his application now. So under the strict reading of the official plan as it is written right now, there is a little bit of a conformity issue because it doesn't quite meet, but we're moving forward on a policy that it would conform with in the fall. Nobody has had any problems or any issues with this proposed policy. We're expecting it that it will be approved. And so that's essentially where we're at. So the recommendation is, if council is satisfied with this proposed application, we're willing to, move forward with it at this time, based on the understanding that the policy regime is in the process of changing, and it would allow this. So he'd be allowed to go a few months earlier than he normally would have been. So I hope I'll stop talking now, and I'll leave it up to committee for if you guys have any questions. I'll do my best to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. To that then, any questions from the committee? Councillor Broom?
So you said that by the fall it should be okay. Are we talking, or is this like our level, like county level, or is it, are we hoping that provincial or feds? I just don't know, if it's county level, yeah, it'll probably pass, but do you really want to put all your eggs in one basket dealing with either provincial or feds?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is an amendment to the county official plan, and the county official plan has received exemption from provincial approvals. So it would be at the county level, and this is one of the draft policies. So hopefully we're going to be moving forward in the summer with the public meeting process for that official plan, and then having that adopted, late summer, early fall. And if that would have already been done, there would be zero issues with this proposed application.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other questions or comments from the committee? No? Angela?
So in the future, can this house, this new house that's being built, be severed away from the farmhouse?
So thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The answer is no. So the policy regime, so the property is prime agricultural land. So it does not permit severance. It doesn't permit this property would be pretty much forever linked with these two dwellings on the property with the severance application. And the minor variance application would be clear that the decision would include that stipulation saying that approval of this secondary dwelling does have limitations, and that it will not be able to be severed from the property.
Okay, so Bruce, you were breaking up a little bit there, but if I can summarize with, if you provide me with a head nod, basically the response is that the property, the new dwelling could not be severed from the existing property in any way, shape, or form in the future.
Yes, that's correct. It cannot be severed, and we can put a condition into the minor variance requiring that it not be severed in the future.
Okay. Questions or comments from the council on that? Mayor Peckett.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Bruce. So if this is a residence being built for farm workers, is it, how restrictive is that? Can that house and piece of property be sold to anyone, or is, because it's being built for, I would assume, to accommodate farm workers, is what I'm reading into it. Is that strict in what it has to be used for, or can it be used as an ordinary house that anyone can buy?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it could not be put on the market and sold. So because it cannot be severed, it can't be sold to anybody else. So the dwelling itself will always be associated with the farm. That being said, it does not have to be used by farm workers. The town, I don't think the township wants to get into the business of regulating who's going to be in what house. So the house would be free, just like any other dwelling, to be limited to who could use it. So it could be farm workers, it could be a family member, it could be a renter. So there wouldn't be any stipulation on how the house could be used.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council? I just have one. I just want to make sure that everybody else has an opportunity to speak first. And I know you've already addressed it, Bruce, but what control mechanisms are in place that would limit and or restrict future councils from readdressing this issue if the proponent came back saying, now I would like to sever? I understand that there's going to be restrictions placed on the application, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we all know that in some cases, there are mechanisms that can be used to reverse reverse the decisions of a previous council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So those, I hesitate to use the word, it can never be severed. As we all know, policy changes over time, councils change over time, bylaws change over time. And if those certain changes occur, maybe perhaps a severance may be available in the future, but under the current policy regime, there is not an opportunity for this property to be severed, this house to be severed. So unless there were significant changes to the Planning Act and the provincial policy statement and the official plan, then this house cannot be severed. But I'm not saying, like, I'll never say never. So there is always that possibility of the policy regime changing. But as it sits now, the house would not be able to be severed.
And again, that policy or those policies rest at the county and the provincial level, not at the municipal level.
That's correct. Mostly at the provincial level.
Okay. Any other further comments or questions from members of the committee? Okay, I'm just going to toggle out here, see if I can follow the agenda. Oh, no, I don't have to. Sorry. It's not that meeting. Sorry. I was stuck in the protocol of the previous two meetings. Just have to bring the agenda back up on my phone here. Okay, so all in favor of the recommendation from Mr. Howarth on 11.2? Carried. On to item 13.1, unfinished business. Mover and seconder, please, for the Renwick Farrow River Road site servicing. Councillor Jacob, Councillor Broom. Questions or concerns on 13.1?
This was more of an FYI because we had discussed it previously.
Yes. So if it's an FYI, are we receiving his information? Sorry. Okay.
Yep.
All those in favor of receiving his information? Carried. Are there any members of the public present, Lindsay? Or if there is, I'll assume that there is and ask if there's any members of the public that wish to speak to the items of business on the agenda for this evening. Not yet.
I see no hands up.
Okay, we'll just give them a couple seconds. I always give them a long 5 count. Okay, I don't see anybody popping up, so thank you very much, everyone. We don't have a closed meeting, and we can consider this meeting adjourned. Thanks very much. Take care.